Hello, everybody, and welcome aboard another edition of Sev and Geff Live. I am the Sev portion, Paul Severino. That's Glenn Geffner over there. Geff, good to see you, pal.
Good to see you. Somebody tweeted me this morning. They said TGIF. I said, I have no idea. It's Friday, but it's a show day. That's all that matters.
That's right. Yeah, days of the week. I think it's actually a new month today, too. Right?
It is.
Is it May 1st?
May 1st.
Hey, we made it.
May.
March 63rd.
Still undefeated.
That's right.
Still on the air.
Oh, my goodness gracious. Yeah, all right. So we got some fun coming up in just a couple of minutes. We've got our good buddy. He's been a beat writer for the Marlins for a long time on MLB.com. One of the good guys in the business as well. Joe Frisaro will join us. We'll talk a lot of different things, kind of what the season may look like, certainly Marlins prospects. And some Marlins history too. I know that's near and dear to many folks' heart, and Joe's been around for a lot of that too. So this is going to be a fun one today, Geff.
For sure. Joe's been covering this team since 2002. He is the dean of the beat. I'm not sure there's anybody in this market who's been closer to the Marlins anywhere near as long as Joe. So he's always a great source of information, a good source of institutional knowledge, going back a long way. Always fun talking with Joe.
Right, absolutely. It's felt like kind of at the beginning of all of this change in our world and everything else and how the baseball world was affected. We'll call it mid-March. It seemed like things were moving kind of at a snail's pace at that time, as it should. We needed to figure things out the right way. And it feels like now things are moving a little bit faster. We had, and this leads me to our question of the day, Geff, we had a little bit of movement, nothing set in stone just yet, but a little bit of movement as to another idea of what the season could look like this year.
And this one seems to be gathering some steam. It feels like there's some momentum behind this idea. We heard MLB float the notion of playing about 100 games or so, maybe starting in late June, early July, and instead of playing your regular American League, National League setup, dividing the 30 teams into 3 10-team geographical divisions. So the Marlins would be in the East with essentially the American League East and the National League East, except you flip Pittsburgh and Atlanta, probably for competitive balance purposes, because the East is loaded. And if you have Atlanta in there too, with the Nationals, with the Phillies, with the Mets, with the Yankees, with the Rays, with the Red Sox, good luck. So you got the Pirates instead of the Braves. The Braves go to the Central. So our question of the day today is, what do you think about that idea? And I gave you 3 options. I asked you, I love it, it's better than nothing, or not a fan. And you can go on to my Twitter, @Glenn Geffner, and cast your vote. We'll have the final tally for you by the end of the show. At the moment, it's better than nothing is leading the way.
It is
by a wide margin.
Yes, it's a runaway at this point in time. Absolutely. Let's start right there, actually, with our guest. The venerable Joe Frisaro joins us right now. Joe, thanks for joining us. Taking a little bit of time. How you doing, buddy?
Doing great, guys. I hope everyone's doing well. You guys and everyone out in the audience.
Yeah. Well, I think yesterday we cracked 50 days in the Severino household of only groceries and essentials quarantine. So is everybody staying safe and healthy and home in the Frisaro household too?
Oh, yeah. I mean, just a little bike riding. Publix is like my best friend, and that's kind of a big moment of venture out. Kind of feel like the old days out in the wilderness when you went and hunting for your food and you came home, you're like, hey, I got steak tonight and toilet paper. This is going to win. So,
and you throw it on the Traeger. You're an expert chef. I see your stuff on social media.
I have
You're
a lot of time,
barbecue.
so I have a lot of time to do the smoking and stuff. I got some chicken wings yesterday at the store. I'm going to be making them probably take about 3-4 hours. And well, I don't have to go that long on wings, but we'll give that a good smoking. Have some wings tonight.
Geff,
you can do a whole segment just on that.
Yeah. Geff, I was going to say our show has morphed from like scratching the baseball itch to talking about Marlins players and prospects, and now our last 2 shows there's been a lot of cooking. We're like Beat Bobby Flay.
JJ Bleday is a chef. We learned on our last episode, Joe. You and JJ got to trade some secrets.
Yeah, and when Trevor Richards was here, he bought a Traeger. I think he got it for Christmas a couple of years ago, and a few years back I got one of those. It's a smoker. It runs on electricity and wood pellets, but it is awesome. It's a complete game changer, and become a little bit of a smoke snob, when you're out and you're like, go place, oh, these wings are the best, or this brisket's the best. Yeah, it's all right. Yeah. So it's, a lot of patience. We got a lot of time. So to do 4.5 hours ribs on the Traeger, it's, made a little video thing, put it up on my Facebook page. So
getting fancy.
Maybe I could send a few of those out as we roll along. Yeah. Hopefully we'll be playing baseball before I become too much of an expert on cooking.
Exactly. All right. Well, let's grill you on our question of the day now, shall we? What would your take on this 30 clubs and 3 regional divisions? Where would you stand on that?
Well, first, I mean, we don't know, so I have to be really careful in what I'm saying on this stuff. But I think literally the league is open to so much because they want this season to be played in some capacity, and you are hearing you hear a lot of different scenarios. Remember, it was going to just be in Arizona, then just in Florida, or Florida and Arizona, then Texas. So I could definitely see something, being in the works for regional travel, regional alignment. To avoid that, you could see a push to be in the stadiums themselves compared to being in, spring training sites. But a lot is fluid. But obviously, we're looking at a drastically shortened season. Probably if 100 games, 110 or whatever games could be very realistic. It's how far they want to push it into November. All these things are on the table, but there is effort. It's fascinating. There's no question. If they, clearly this year is going to look 100% different. It already has. So I think a lot of people need to have an open mind, and as we move forward on this, and obviously safety and getting the sport back and running, but doing it in a safe way. But it could kind of be a year of creativity and seeing maybe some of this experimentation. I would anticipate an expanded playoff if it's that scenario. So let's say they do that. 3 divisions with 10, or there'll be no American League nationally, it'll just be one big league. Maybe there's 4, maybe 5 teams are in the playoffs, and how would that impact a team like the Marlins, who people consider mostly still in that building up stage? But if they're 100 games and probably no trade deadline, and you get off those first 10 games of the season, you might determine a team like the Marlins they get out of the chute really well. Next thing you know, they're a team, pulling in a lot of these young prospects, getting them up early, and trying to make this a fun summer.
Yeah,
you make an interesting point. If you roll the clock back a year, remember the Nationals started 19-31. They came back, they won the World Series. If you're 19-31, you're not going to win the World Series in an abbreviated 2020 season. So it could be interesting to see how that might play out in the long term. Looking at the Marlins from this perspective, Joe, of a shorter year. Minor league baseball very much in question. Will there be games in A-ball, AA, AAA this year? How big will big league rosters be? Will there be a taxi squad of 10 or 20 or more players playing in minor league ballparks, staying sharp so they're ready if there's an injury, if they're needed one way or another? With the Marlins coming into what seemed to be such a pivotal year, so many prospects reaching the big leagues this year, so many others kind of going to AAA for finishing school this year, does this abbreviated season, does this shortened season, maybe it helps, or does it hurt the building process? Does it set you back some time?
From the Marlins standpoint alone, it makes it really fascinating because clearly there was a lot of momentum, as we remember, and especially we're getting those final 10 days. There's 2 weeks to opening day when they canceled the rest of spring, but it essentially was 10 days. And those final 10 days are kind of when the guys like Aguilar, Corey Dickerson, those guys hadn't really locked in yet. We heard about, Jazz and the excitement he brought in Lewin and those guys, and Monte Harrison creating a lot of excitement. But those final 10 or so days of spring training, traditionally for veteran players, are when they dial it in and they get ready. So this was going to be a fascinating time to see even how those prospects or guys like Brinson, who was having a good camp, would react in those final 10 days when guys kind of dial it in. And it was going to be fascinating to see if that momentum the Marlins were building in spring could have just rolled into the season and over 162, how hot they got. Now, it was also a very emotional camp. These guys all wanted to prove something. Clearly, Jazz and Monte, they came in from the first game, were putting heat on everyone, like, we're here to play. We're not here to get in shape. We're here to play. And it kind of changed the energy and the dynamic of spring training more than I'd seen in a long time, because veteran teams don't really care, early on. Whether they do well, they just stay healthy, build up. They know what it takes to get, to the season. So the big question and challenge to me from the Marlins standpoint is, and Donnie had done a great job with his staff to keep that going. Now, these are young kids. They go into camp, let's say it's a 2-week camp. I think you had Brendan Kinsler the other day on, or a week or so on, saying that 2 weeks or so, they might need. How quickly could they get ready? Could these kids? I think a veteran squad would be probably in a better spot because guys know what it takes to get ready. so that would be the most fascinating part. Could the Marlins replicate what that momentum, get that mojo back that this team was clearly going to have to feed off of a lot of confidence and a lot of, let's get the ball rolling and start surprising some people. And even if the year isn't what they ultimately hope for, at least move that process of building to the point where 21 they're clearly going to be. So that's going to be the challenge. That to me is going to be the most fascinating thing to see how quickly and if they could recapture, all that they built in a short period of time, or in that first month before we canceled the rest of spring.
And along those lines too, I think in kind of what you're talking about, some momentum, they were winning some games, and we could talk about what it means to win games in spring. I think it's important for a team like the Marlins just to have that feeling of shaking hands and being happy about a success, whether it's March 3rd or whether it's April 3rd. And I know that the two dates are obviously very different. But in terms of the momentum of the energy, and I felt that we probably talked about it in Jupiter, there was a different energy from the players for sure. There was a different energy from the fan base. Do you think that momentum has been affected by this? Or do you think that momentum and that energy and that hope will come back in whatever it is, 4 weeks, 5 weeks, 6 weeks?
Well, that's so hard to say because we don't know what people's lives look like. It's, what does discretionary income look like? What are the personal challenges of the fan base? Obviously, this is, it's a bigger issue, clearly, than just, hey, we're going to be on the field, whatever the day is to be back on the field. So that's really hard to answer. You just hope, though, if, when they constantly note that sports are really good about the, the healing process, the fact that someone wearing, Miami across the front of their jersey and playing New York or Philly or whoever, you kind of get that community pride going through your sports teams, and just turning on TV and not seeing, throwback games and historical games where you're actually seeing a game, whether they're fans in the stands or not, or how that goes. But you could at least kind of build it up. So I think it could be a little gradual. It'd be very fascinating. We're hopeful that everyone's doing well and most people can recover very quickly and they'll have that energy. But, right now it's hard. It's hard to say, whether or not everyone's going to be, boom, hey, the season started, so, let's all be all in, because we don't know where people are going to be. But the sports fan, certainly, if they had their way, it'd be exciting and fast. That's why I think this year, clearly, will be examined and looked at in a historical sense like none that we've experienced in our lifetimes.
Yeah.
When you turn the clock back to October 2017, Joe, Bruce Sherman and Derek Jeter bought this ball club. They laid out their plan. They were very honest and upfront from day one. There's going to be some painful decisions along the way. You sit here now 2.5 years later. I think most fans have come around. People who've been paying attention have come around and really understand where this is headed. You were one person who bought in from day one, and you knew the situation on and off the field that the Marlins were dealing with. You knew what could be done if you do it the right way. Is this team about where you thought it would be in this building process 2.5 years in? Are they ahead of schedule? Are they a little bit behind? What do you think?
They probably are where you'd think they are. Obviously, it's painful, and it's easy to say back in 17. You could see that team, as although Stanton was the MVP and the 59 homers, and there was hope that, they kind of got within 5 or whatever games on wild card. Still a lot. 5 games is still a lot when you got good teams, and then it kind of, they sputtered at the end and didn't even finish over 500. But, that team kind of performed when they're kind of out of it. They were already 15 under or whatever, and then Stanton got really hot. He caught fire in Ozuna. And, they made for individual storylines. Stanton made August fun, especially with the 18 or so homers and the home run derby and Justin Bour. But that team just didn't win. And I knew enough going back to even when the Marlins, kind of broke it up in after the 05 season, and they had a choice. And I remember Larry Beinfest, Michael Hill talking about it. They could have kept Josh Beckett along with Don Trell and Miguel Cabrera, but they knew Josh's makeup and where he was. He was already becoming a star in baseball. That he was not going to take well to being part of a partial rebuild. So Josh went. They ended up being a brilliant trade for both teams because Hanley Ramirez and Anibal Sanchez coming to Florida, a lot of success. And it's really hard to kind of half build, so you kind of have to take it down to the down to the bottom floor. And as hard as that is, unless those players completely bought in. And, clearly, Yelich was already, rumbling. He wanted out. And, Stanton, is it going to turn out to be one of the greatest moves that Michael Hill was able to pull off is to move $295 million. What would have happened if that trade hadn't happened? So that trade, I think, historically will be looked on favorably. But it clearly is painful to lose 105 games and 98, 99 the year before. So that aspect of it makes it really hard. But, it kind of had to happen. Otherwise, you would have been looking at a 75 to 82 win team. And you just don't go get pitching. I know people argue all the time. You just don't get if you need 3 starters and 2 relievers, you're in a rebuild.
I think take Jose Fernandez out of the mix as well.
Exactly.
On top of everything else.
Yes, obviously that changed changed a lot of the direction of the organization, and that's why even when people they'll go back on Twitter and say, "Oh, what do you think of the number 3 overall? Should they? Oh, there's a deep college pitching draft." Well, if your evaluation and the guy at 3 is an ace, a legitimate 1 has all the attributes of being that, compared to the guy at 40 who might be a big leaguer, but he might be a back-end starter or a starter turns into a reliever. Every team is loaded with those guys, and the Marlins have more than their share of those 4s and 5s that, yes, they could be in the big leagues, but are they going to help you get to where you want to go? So that's why you don't just look at it as you're looking at. Look what the Yankees did in the offseason. I got Garrett Cole. Those are the guys that win championships. Those are the guys that put you in position to win championships, not just loading up on, oh, we could get this guy at 60 and he could be in the big leagues. And yes, obviously they're guys that are lower draft picks and they become aces. But if your evaluation, you're tasked with getting the best player and the guy who fits the highest ceiling profile, and that's who you take. So, that's what the Marlins clearly, when we go back to 17, did not have the organizational depth to seriously contend. And that's why the hard decision had to be made. And now when you say, are they there? Yeah, they kind of were, because this year looked like it could be pushing a lot closer to the 500 mark, and that's where you needed to be.
Yeah, and it's contending year in and year out. I mean, if there's any franchise that knows the highs and the lows, I'm sure it's this one, right? I mean, 2 playoff appearances, 2 World Series championships, and not much in between, and long gaps even in between those 2. So the point being, and the smarter folks, the sabermetrically minded folks are the ones that have done these studies where you don't want to be in the middle, whatever those magic numbers are, 75 to 85 or whatever. You either want to be less than that so you get the higher draft picks, or you want to be more than that so that you're in the playoffs and you're getting that revenue and, of course, the chances once you're in the postseason to win a title. So that's the thing, is that figuring out ways, and I love what the Marlins have done and will continue to do in terms of having this thing be, broadening the target a little bit and not looking at, 2021, we've got one chance to go whole hog here in 1 year, and then after that, I don't know about that. Yep. I mean, you're looking at something that is, we say the word a lot, but sustainable, and that's what the Marlins are certainly going for.
Look at what the Dodgers, I think they are such a model just for organizational depth. They have Bellinger's an MVP, a superstar, and, they got,
but homegrown and developed.
They're homegrown
right.
too. But they're so reluctant to move, to sign the big free agent, and they're so reluctant to move their high-end prospects for exactly what you're talking about. Because of all this resources the Dodgers have, they still are aware you're not winning with a core. That's what I wish the market. The core. They had a championship core. Yeah, I mean, if you look at that, 2017 lineup. And assuming that they all were hitting, staying healthy and then being who they are, obviously you got 3 ridiculously good outfielders and the best catcher in baseball. And D. Gordon, really solid leadoff guy. After that, there was nothing underneath that. It's nothing to back that up. And as I think you're seeing with usage of players, and not everyone's an everyday guy. Some teams may have 4 regulars and 4 guys who are, positioned out. Guys get hot and cold, and so, the Dodgers, they sit around and they got guys like Chris Taylor, like ridiculously productive for them, and Kike Hernandez and these guys that go all over and play. Obviously, you like superstars. Getting Mookie Betts, great, but they traded for him. And whether they signed him or not, that's another story. But that.
But they traded players they developed for Mookie, and they developed the Walker Buehler. They drafted and brought Walker Buehler to the big leagues. Clayton Kershaw. You mentioned Bellinger. That's a team with a huge payroll, but they brought Andrew Friedman over from Tampa Bay. Now they got a huge payroll, and they're very smart.
Yeah, and you have to be. And we get emotional over Stanton and the 59 homers, but there's a lot of missed games by Stanton. Yelich didn't become Yelich until
that was the thing.
Until he went to Milwaukee. He never. I think he had 21 homers and 16 or whatever was his career high here, homer totals. Now he is threatening 60 if he didn't get hurt or whatever. So it's like it. You just don't win with a few. That it's hard to grasp, but I think that mindset over depth over core. And I think as a market, the more educated we are on that so what the Marlins have done, and you look at camp, and I've told the executives when just talking at spring training, back in about 15 and 16, remember in spring training, the Marlins didn't even, Stanton wouldn't even go to field 7 in Jupiter. And they mandated her over there on field 2, which literally, for those who haven't been there, it's right behind the clubhouse, and fans have a hard time even having access to that. So they'd send a lot of the minor leaguers down to field 7 where fans were, and the big leaguers just basically left the building, went out field 2. There's probably about 8 players. I'd stay in the media room right if I had to. I'd poke my head out, make sure those 3 or 4 players were still in the field, nothing happened to them, and I'd go back in because there wasn't much to go to the backfields to see. Now this year, at every level, you're looking at, okay, there's a guy, there's a prospect, this guy has a shot, and they're legit shots, not just, this guy, he might make it to the big leagues and be your 13th reliever. So that's what's made it fascinating, and from a fan perspective, should be exciting because you have this volume of players now, assuming not all are going to pan out, obviously, but, Cameron Meisner's on this field. Okay, he wasn't in big league camp, but we got to keep an eye on him. Nasim Nunez, let's keep an eye on him. Peyton Burdick, let's go see what he's doing. Some of these guys are going to have a chance to be productive big leaguers. And then I love a lot of the younger writers, and they're like, we don't want a prospect hug. Well, we haven't even seen the prospects produced yet in the big leagues, and they want to trade half of them and go get Didi Gregorius or something. It's like, no, it's still a process. And I guess the thing I'm probably most impressed with, and it's probably also a little frustrating for people, is how stubbornly disciplined Derek Jeter and this core have been. Because there are times when we feel it, when we're sitting there covering 105 losses, that's not fun. And they're like, no, we're stay the course. And as long as, whether it works, we don't know ultimately, but at least they're giving it a chance to stay the course, develop those players, see if Bleday becomes, they think and hope, that a great kid and great interview the other day, and you wish the guy, part of what's coming and where the excitement should be. And Gerard Encarnacion, that's a kid who could be maybe all of them, and we're going to talk about him. So there's a lot of guys to really keep an eye on, and that's what I think is so fascinating about where the Marlins are right now.
Yeah, and listen, you guys were there before I started in 2018. You guys saw that. I was the new regime was there, and 2018 was the start of it for them. It was the start of it for me as well. So you guys were there, and I'm not trying to badmouth anybody, but when you say the phrase "stay the course," I was still working at MLB Network. I had a pretty good finger on the pulse of what most teams were doing, not all the ins and outs, but a pretty decent idea. And it really seemed as though, from a distance, I'll preface it again, that the Marlins were like, all right, let's try this. And that didn't work. Let's try something else. Okay, that didn't work. Let's try something else. And now it's exactly what you said. It's stay the course, because it's not necessarily they want to win today, but it's with a real vision of what tomorrow will hold as well. And not upsetting that apple cart too.
Oh, there's no question. And no, not every who I got along with very well. Every would change, almost like the wind. If one day this looked good, we lost 3 in a row. Wait, we lost 3 in a row, but nope, this guy sent that, this guy's in. Next thing you know, we're sellers, we're buyers, it would change so rapidly that once your clubhouse lost confidence and confidence of that they believed in the players, that's when you create a lot of disarray.
You mentioned a few names. You mentioned Gerard Encarnacion. You mentioned J.J. Bleday. Let's turn the clock back to the glory days of February and early March before we got shut down here. We were excited watching some of these young players, in many cases seeing them on the field for the first time with our own eyes. We'd read about them, we'd heard about them, we'd seen video. Who were a handful of the guys who really caught your attention and turned your head this spring?
Well, I'm going to start with Monte, because I think he kind of set a tone the second at bat in spring training. He really came to win a job, and that was clear. A lot of them did, but he really was like, look, and we know Monte has a lot of raw talent, a lot of raw power. And you probably agree, Geff, that outside of Stanton, in terms of physical specimen, he's the most we've seen since Giancarlo. In terms of this guy is like, whoa, that's a Superman body. And so what he's capable of doing, obviously he's got to make a lot of strides in the contact, but he's showing the discipline to stay on a breaking ball, hit the ball the other way, and then use his legs to impact the game. So he caught my eye right there. I think he kind of set a tone, and I think that really the way he interacts with Jazz Chisholm and the way they push each other good-naturedly, and you could hear it in the clubhouse when they joke around and such, it brought Jazz, who doesn't need a lot to make him, go off and be a highly energetic guy. So those two guys immediately caught my eye just in their presence on the field. Jazz is one of those guys that you just look at, because he draws your attention. He's probably going to have a lot of people love him and probably a lot of opponents who don't, because he's probably going to be one of those guys who rubs, if he's not on your side, the wrong way. But he plays with so much passion, and he's got so much raw talent. Yes, there are flaws in his game, in terms of contact rate, and maybe tries to do a little too much at the plate defensively. He could probably be a little more disciplined in some areas, knowing where to go on the field, cutoffs, and so forth. But he's going to be fine. So those guys. Lewin Diaz immediately caught my eye, and then I was talking to people. He looks the part, the guy at first base. He just, very fluid and swings really good. You could see early on, and I go back to even when Brian Anderson wasn't posting huge numbers in the minors, but Andy looked the part, and he was like, whoa, there's so much there. And Lewin reminds me of Andy a few years back, where this guy looks like he's a big leaguer. And so he's going to be fascinating to see what type of player he becomes. Jesus Sanchez, we didn't see so much early because he is, recovering from a little bit of an ailment there. But you could start seeing the way that guy could hit the baseball as well. I was very impressed with Bleday, how he went about his business. He seems to, he's going to adjust. His first at bat was against, was it Jerry Blevins, I believe, with the Mets. No, it was, I've drawn a blank. But he was a left-handed pitcher with big league experience, and he got a hit off him. Worked a full count. He had a good take on a 2-2 slider. He laid off that and for both, to run the count full, and then he got a hit. So there's just a lot of, the approach. It looks like he could be a really, really solid guy. The pitchers, Edward Cabrera was just electric. You could just see that. What we haven't seen, though, is how does he command starting 5-6 innings? It's one thing to go out in one inning against the Nationals and strike a few guys out, but what are you going to do 3 times through that lineup? So that there's a long way to go there. I don't, he doesn't have a ton of history of high success, but really exciting player.
See, pitcher, that's where this year scares me, when Cabrera doesn't get that full year of development. And I know that the exact same thing can be said in any camp and in any franchise. But guys like that who need to go to finishing school in AA or in AAA are losing that year. And that's what concerns me about where this team is so close to turning the corner, getting over that hump.
Yeah, but what if that is, and let's say it is a year where there's that more of a taxi squad where there are, like you say, 10 or so guys that are kind of hanging around and being there. Obviously, the active roster would be probably still 26, so we're speculating. But, if there is whatever happens with minor leagues, but if you just have a group of players, you might have Edward pitching the big leagues in July and helping you win. So that clock, the thing is, he's 22. He's not like he's 19 years old. So, yes, you don't ideally have that, but you might have him helping you win games and getting you to a wild card or, some sort of, in some grand baseball tournament. If they end up going that way, he may gain so much confidence pitching 2 months in the big league. So Yes, it's not going to be ideal for anyone because ideally you want 500 at bats and 25 starts for minor league pitch or whatever your organizational benchmarks are. But you're not going to have that. But we're also going to find, I think, it's going to find who wants to play and who has been during this time, taking whatever steps they can to be ready when the bell rings to hit the ground running. I think we're going to find out really fast. That's going to be another fascinating part is who look like they're really ready to play. And I think from an evaluation standpoint, we'll get a pretty good clue. Real quick, to digress a little bit, last year, because of the good draft class, we go to the GCL. If I wasn't on the road with the team, it was regular. I'd go up to Jupiter. A lot of the beat guys would do it. And we watch a GCL, and you see Nassim and Victor Mesa, and you'd see them like 2 days in a row playing at noon in 95 humidity and 95 heat. And I would tell people, I'm like, you're finding out who wants to be a baseball player. Because you're 17, 18 years old, and you're on, no shade on those backfields, and you're just baking. And you're coming out and you're performing a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks into this, and you're showing up every day to play. You're finding out who wants to be a baseball player. And so I think that kind of mentality is going to happen, especially with these prospects. They could really run with it. Those guys, half those guys didn't want to get cut anyway. They thought they were going to be ready right now. So, that kind of youthful swagger, Beckett said it back in 2003 in the first interview before his start in game 1 against the Giants. He was like, I think 22, maybe 23 at the time. And he said, well, yeah, we're young and maybe we're just too stupid to know we're this good. So I'm paraphrasing, but that's kind of what Josh said. And maybe some of these kids will surprise you and run with that, hey, guess what? You're going to be on backfields playing scrimmage games. And next thing you know, 2 weeks in, Jazz is playing in the big leagues or Edwards pitching in the big leagues and they're doing something. So it's obviously it's not conventional. Obviously it's not ideal, but this is a whole about improvisation and which players and teams kind of figure that out.
Yeah, and it's about trying to find the positives in things. And you kind of took the words out of my mouth. I wasn't even thinking Josh Beckett, but I'm sure that we all know what the outsiders think the Marlins are supposed to be in 2020. And you're right. Maybe the Marlins can get to a spot where they're stupid enough to not know how bad they're supposed to be, right? And if it turns out to, and again, it's all speculation at this point, if it turns out to a 100-game season, 110-game season, it's a sprint right out of the gates, right? And it's anybody's guess as to who is going to survive. And if it gets to a spot where you're 2/3 of the way into the season, Marlins they have a shot. They do what we were just talking about, maybe dip into the farm system a little bit. Now you also get a taste of a pennant race as well, right? We've talked about it with J.J. Bleday and what that meant for him to be on a championship squad with whoever his teammates were, whatever level it was. Gerard Encarnacion in the Fall League. You're fighting for something. You're playing meaningful games. And there's only one Game 7 of the World Series, right? But there are other ways to find that competitiveness and bring it out. And if it's at the big league level, in a year where you're everybody's underdog, I think it could be an awful lot of fun.
Yeah. And obviously there's a lot that you have to temper, to make sure physically they're ready. But a lot of times if there's a shorter sample size, that's when, the youthful players may have an advantage. They might be, those type of guys. They haven't had to endure. Like what normally wears a team out in a traditional 162-game season is, think about it. If you're a pitcher, or a star pitcher, but you never pitch in September, right? These hitters, their bodies have played 140-game seasons. They're not used to that. That last month is a drain. And for some of these guys, those final 10 days, 2 weeks of a season, and that's why you see a lot of guys. And as sports writers, a lot of times the Rookie of the Year, the MVPs, and those type of people are based on how they finish. Because some of these other guys have had great years, and they just hit the wall in those final 3 weeks, and their production just goes down. Hanley was the Rookie of the Year in 2006. He might have hit like 350 in September, and that's what pushed him ahead of Ryan Zimmerman, and he was the Rookie of the Year. Because he just finished so strong. Chris Coughlin was the Rookie of the Year in 2009, did the same thing. In the final 2 months, only Derek Jeter had more hits in baseball than Chris Coughlin in those final 2 months, and that got him Rookie of the Year. So, these young guys can do it. And if you've already eliminated the wear and tear of the long season, that again, it could really play to their advantage. Again, assuming they have that right mindset and are physically and emotionally and mentally ready to play. And that's going to be, again, I think that's going to be a big challenge, not just for Don Mattingly, but 29 other managers to kind of, hey, look, we're a month in. We're already 2 weeks away. The veterans were already there. How do you just kind of turn the light switch on? Do we talk about a society, no, you don't turn the light on just automatically and all of a sudden we're in movie theaters and everything. It's a gradual buildup. How does baseball, these players, because they're not going to have a gradual buildup. They're going to have to kind of build up right away. So, again, that's why I think we're hopeful that they play. We're hopeful it's at least 100 games as fans and people in the industry. But that's going to be, for me, as someone covering stuff, I'm going to be very fascinated to see the way everyone responds.
We know that ultimately you win with talent, but good teams can become great teams with the right culture, with the right environment. And that's something that fans don't get to have a front row seat to see as it develops and as it plays out. You've had a front row seat the last couple of years. Can you discuss the way you've seen the culture of this franchise, not just even at the big league level, but top to bottom, how you've seen the culture evolve over these last couple of years?
I think Gary Dembos had a lot of influence on that, where you could kind of see just that mentality of how they carry themselves, the captain camps, the expectations. And Gary's, as we all know, very hands-on. He's on all the backfields and the front fields, and you're seeing. I've covered a lot of players and this. I've been on the beat since '02. They're very respectful. They're great to deal with in the media. They're very respectful how they handle themselves, how they carry themselves, and wearing that Marlins uniform is a source of real pride for them. So that I think they know that it's an us against the world type of mentality because they're not given much of a chance to be that good. So they have that going for them. And they got an organization that's kind of drilling that into them, that we are going to do it this way. Even when you saw at the big league level some hurt and some way too many losses, and it was like to see at Jupiter in those backfields. Martin Prado talked about it a lot last year when he was on rehab, and he would talk to these players. Like he would tell me, he said, "Joe, this is not going to take long. They're going to win. It's not going to take long," and because he could see how they were developing these players, how they're treating these players, their mindset about being Miami Marlins. Some others, let's face it, and no fault of their own because the culture was created for them. They'd come in, I'd have a good 3, 4, 5 years, and I'm probably getting traded. And if I do really well, I'll go to a contender. So that mentality has to flip, and that's already been starting, and now it's competition. Remember, that was probably the most used word, I think, in spring training was, competition. And they're all pulling for each other. And meanwhile, the guy might be keeping you in the minors, but, it's like that mentality, just be better, I'm not going to, you don't want a bunch of players making the team by default. That's usually not the recipe for good success in the big leagues for a team. Might be good for a couple of players that, I don't even have to play that well. I'm going to stay here.
Yeah.
These guys are going to be pushing themselves to be on that 40-man roster. Would be very fascinating because that already was going to be fascinating before this happened. So it's going to probably be even more, because only X amount can stay.
There's a lot of folks that think that clubhouse chemistry doesn't mean an awful lot because it's not anything that you can find on Baseball Reference or Fangraphs or something like that. So I always try to think about an analogy that those folks who don't believe in it may understand. And like if you have what we'd all call a normal job, right? Let's say you're a salesman. Well, you could be a great salesman, right? So you have your own great numbers. But if you're a complete jerk and nobody wants to work with you, it brings down the entire office. Right, and I'm not going to name any names because I wasn't there for some of that. That Geffner guy's got a rotten attitude, but not that guy.
Different name.
Right, sorry. But you know what I'm saying? So like, just because it doesn't show up on the back of a baseball card doesn't mean it means something. And sometimes a good attitude can get more out of someone than what their skills might be. And I think that all kind of ties into what the Marlins have also done well, which I think for most outsiders gets overlooked. They'll see, well, the farm system's gone from this to this. That's great. The losses have gone from this to this, and that's really not great. Well, how really good are they? But the veterans that they have brought in these last few years, I think, and Geff's heard me say it too much, and those that have watched games on Fox Sports Florida have probably heard me say it too much, but the fingerprints of the veterans that have been in this organization the last couple of seasons are going to be on the young players that we've been talking about for the last 45 minutes here in the years to come. And that's another thing that I think the Marlins have done extremely well, is the veterans that they have brought in have shown these guys how to be professionals in a performance standpoint, but also what this team is also very focused on, community, and how to be a good professional baseball person, not just a baseball player.
Oh, no question. And, when you were saying that, Paul, I'm thinking that immediately Prado, Curtis Granderson, Neil Walker, those guys are not here anymore. But think about last year. Again, I brought this up a few times. 105 losses. That is so many losses. The second worst. That could have been so dreadful walking in that clubhouse, being around those players. And those players were great in terms of their demeanor, their ability to show up and play the next day. And a lot of credit. And it's probably a reason why Don Mattingly is still here, is his team never left him. And no matter what, and again, granted, it is what it is, but those guys, the Prados, the Curtis Grandersons, Neil Walkers, those guys did so much to help these guys carry themselves as professionals, and really made Donnie's job so much easier.
Yeah,
and
I'd throw Starlin's name into that mix too.
I'm leaving him out. Yes,
Starlin, and I would also
he wasn't. Yes, Starlin was very much so.
And I'd also say this, and this will probably aggravate some people, and then there's more to it. Who would you rather have on your team the last 2 years, Starlin Castro or Giancarlo Stanton? Just the last 2 years alone. I would make the case, given how many games were played and everything else, that Starlin Castro did a lot better when we look at the end of 2019 than how we thought it might go at the beginning of 2018. That's just me.
Stanton drove in 100 runs a year before.
Listen, I get it, but that's 1 year. That's the year before.
Yes, the 1 year, and then he got hurt. But yeah, it's like being asked to do that, and it wouldn't have been fair for Giancarlo to have stayed if there was no end in sight. And obviously, Starlin knew his situation. And he knew the situation. If you have the players, if you have something now keep in mind this, we've talked a lot about what the Marlins have done. I still think it would be very constructive for them to identify 2 or 3 of these players right now, whether it's Brian Anderson or Sandy or a few others, and lock them up, because you don't want them to be feeling like they are just here for the next one. You have to have some level of continuity. It just can't be 26 always being changed every 3-4 years. So that's where I think with Giancarlo, if you did to him, like when you think about it, probably in all the years I've covered this sport for MLB.com since 2002, in the National League East, you have Ryan Zimmerman, who clearly, when the Nationals were going through their rough times, was, hey, I'm on board. This is going to be what I'm going to. I'll live through the bad parts, and you're happy for Zim that he got the ring last year. And then David Wright, he dealt with some bad Met teams, and then he went to the World Series in 15. And I guess Freddie Freeman had some down, but the Braves haven't had too many really down years. But you need to have a few of your players. You have to kind of approach, in my opinion, some of these guys and say, look, this is what we're doing. It was hard, but now the fruits are here, and we want you to be centerpieces of where we're going. And maybe that's what they're already planning, but that's what I think you also need to do, just kind of at least get some of that continuity, that what we're building here is going to be sustainable, and these are going to be some of these players that are going to be part of when we start going to the playoffs.
So you mentioned Brian Anderson's name. On and off the field, he's proven to be one of those guys over the last couple of years. Are there others you'd put in that group as well? You say these are core guys who are here right now, who we need to lock up and keep around to be part of hopefully the next championship team here?
Well, Miggy's already locked up a couple of years. It'd probably have to be it had to be Sandy. You have to sit around and go to Sandy and, maybe Caleb, but I'm not sure that's what they're thinking. I would love to take care of it. If I had confidence that these are my pitchers, go lock a few of them up and a couple of position players. But, let's say the day that Bleday comes up, and let's say he has 2 really strong years, and you might have to start thinking what the Braves did with Acuna and Albies.
Yeah.
You're going to have to start. You're going to let's get it going. Because we want to identify that these are. And I get it. Not everyone is that, and some people are going to be left out. But there's naturally going to be some levels of turnover. But at least you kind of have you've identified that these are Miami Marlins, and these are going to be the focal points of moving forward.
When you mentioned Bleday's name, obviously he's only had a limited number of professional at-bats down the stretch last year in Jupiter, but we talked to him the day he signed in Miami last year. Paul and I had him on the most recent show. For me, this kid is a face of the franchise-type player, potentially. Player personality in every way. He could be, if he comes to the big leagues and performs at that Jose Fernandez-type level, where he's the first guy you think of when you think about the Marlins on and off the field, a guy who you just wrap your arms around and embrace for hopefully 10, 15 years.
Yeah, Freddie Freeman, that type of
thing.
Yeah, no question. I think that's where I think they are doing it. When the Marlins are drafting, obviously with the number 3 pick, this is going to be a huge pick when they get to that, whenever the draft's going to be. But I think that the players they're drafting have to be. Our market is so unique in the fact that these guys that are the young core of tomorrow, these guys have to want to be Miami Marlins. You don't want to just be, so they're going to have to find someone that's going to say, look, you're going to be going to a market that potentially isn't going to have a lot of fans right away if they're not winning, and media coverage isn't always the most favorable or existent. And so you're going to have to want to be, because it's easy to say, I'll go be a Yankee. I'll just go. I'll be a Yankee. I'll go be a Dodger. I could be, make the money. I don't have to do whatever, be kind of a little personal salesman on the side. That's already built in for me. I'm the latest superstar for the Yankees. I'm Aaron Judge. It's like, how bad is that? So you have to get players that completely are open to that. That's why I love to see them get South Florida kids. In the draft, whenever possible, because, we have Gabby Sanchez part of our media now. And, it's like, he's Miami guy. He loved being here. He loved playing here. He went to UM. He's from here. He played high school here. The few of those, the more we have, Atlanta's been very good at doing that. They're players that, and it's not like there's any shortage of them, to see those guys that really are, because that I think is what's going to connect to the youth. Now, I don't buy that baseball, no one likes baseball, it's boring or whatever. Yes, there are people that say that, but baseball fields are always packed in South Florida on the youth level, and they're all over. They're baseball players all over here. Watching the 2015 World Series the other day, and Eric Hosmer wins Game 1 of the sacrifice fly. Guess where he's from? It's like these guys, a few of them were here. Could be unbelievable in terms of, we don't know yet what that would mean to the fan base identifying and players saying, hey, I get what South Florida's about. Everyone kind of makes fun of us. Everyone kind of, but this is us. This is where, we're the 305, we're,
right.
The 954s, this is the people. Let's get them here. Let's get some of them here. And I think that could help. We don't know. We'll see what that does in terms of bringing fans in.
Right. And the Latin market too, not just the high school kids that live in Florida, but the folks that are living in whether it be Puerto Rico or whatever that can somehow get here as well. Dominican, right? I mean, all these places that are so close that for them to get back home is so easy. Jazz has certainly mentioned that, being from the Bahamas, that how much that change of scenery, being closer to home, has helped him in his short time in the organization. All right, well, listen, we've talked a lot about the present. We've talked some about the future as well. Let's talk about the past. I know that something that you guys over at MLB.com have been doing these last few weeks has been putting together these position rankings in the history, the best this, the best that. How much fun was that to kind of go through some of the history? It's probably a little bit easier. What was the time frame? Because the Marlins are going back to '93, the Yankees are going back to 1917 or whatever it is.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny, Paul, because as a company, we're like, what's kind of moving the needle, and it's people have been nostalgic as this virus is keeping us home. We're probably looking through our old yearbooks and everything else, and so history is kind of we have more time to reflect and reminisce about it, and it has been fun. I've written stories, for previewing games of the '97 World Series, Game 7, or our opening day at MLB.com, we did Game 6, Josh's complete game against the Yankees. Those, I had a live chat then. Juan Pierre and Todd Hollingsworth helped me out with some color on that, and it's fascinating. And yes, these lists have been fun to do. And what I like about them is it's my list. It's easy to say, okay, I could just go and look at Fangraphs and see the top 5 WAR at each position, and then that's my list. But I could have my surprises. I could put Alex Gonzalez as a number 2 shortstop ahead of Edgar Renteria. He wasn't a better player, but in Marlins history and what he meant, I'll have him too. Hanley is a runaway because just the numbers, and 3-time starting All-Star was hard to you just can't take that away that Hanley was that. But you just realize, obviously, our fan base knows it's how many great players came through here, and it is painful a little bit to just have Miguel Cabrera, write about him. But then you start thinking, he was here 5 years, and his career launch here. You appreciate that being part of the jumping points. But it has been fun, and fans have seemed to respond to it. And that's the thing I like to convey to those listeners. It's like, hey, it's my list. If your list disagrees, that's fine. Again, I could go and do the complete analytical breakdown and say, yes, this, and this, and don't disagree with me because the numbers say otherwise. But, I'm putting more of that into that. I'm putting more of my perspectives and where they are on my list. And that may not jive with everyone's list, but that's the fun of it. Go back to what was the great debate in New York in the 50s, and, was Snyder, Mays, or Mantle. It's like, to each fan base, they all had their opinion. So it has been fun, and I talked to Mike Jacobs. I'm doing something on a team that he played on, and just reminiscing some of that stuff. I tell you, as someone who's covered his team forever, you start realizing how old you are, because I'm like, oh, you were only here like 4 years ago, right? No, I was here in like 07. It's like.
And now he's managing in the minor leagues here.
Yeah, and he's managing. Yeah, he's managing. Yeah, so it's great to do that stuff, and obviously we have nothing but time right now to reminisce. But there is history, and I hope at least some people are kind of using that to kind of look and say, hey, you know what? Outside of the obvious, why'd you break it up? But that '97 team, when you realize some of the stuff that happened that year, Gary Sheffield, 2 homers in an inning. It's like these things, like you don't remember that, but then you do. It's like these are stuff that's fun. It's fun to put Cliff Floyd at the top of my list in left field. I could have put Ozuna there, and I'm looking, and Cliff was a really impactful player. He was like a really good player, and people tend to forget that. Just how good these guys were when they wore the Marlins uniform.
And a tremendous guest on Sev Geff Live, too, Cliff Floyd.
One of our first,
yes,
Cliff Floyd,
which you can find on our YouTube channel, by the way.
It's there, along with all the other archive programs. Hey, Joe, reminiscing a little bit, got a fan question for you off of Twitter from Pop Time. What has been your personal favorite Marlins moment to cover?
Well, it has to go back to 03 World Series and seeing that whole playoff, ride was that. And I make no secret. I mean, that's the funnest team I ever covered. But they won it all. It's like I saw them 10 under. I saw them fire the manager. I saw them, and they won it all. And every one of those players, it's always so special to talk to any of them, to reminisce with them, and that's the goal. I love covering it with so many players and so many moments. But I didn't cover the '97 team, but other than a freelance opportunity at the time, I think it's still with Tampa Tribune. But the 03 is, that's special. When you win it all, it's special, and we hope there's more of that. But that's easily the favorite moment.
Now here's part 2 from Pop Time. Wants to know, is there a player, past or present, who you particularly enjoyed working with the most over the years?
There's so many, but I just did something on Dontrell. A long story. I don't know how many people like 3,000 word stories anymore, but it's pinned on my Twitter account, and I just love that if you need to reach someone like him and, to see him come up and they're special, but it's not just him. I mean, Juan Pierre was, I always say, the most professional player I ever covered. And, and we see him all the time because he's still involved with the team. But, JP was just awesome, and he's way up there.
What a tremendous segue. You mentioned Dontrelle Willis, Joe. Toward the end of our conversations with our guests, we always do what's called a hit and run. So they're quick hitting questions, then we let you run. So you mentioned Dontrelle, and Geff, he's right at the top of that list, isn't he?
That's right. We're going to do a little word association today, Joe. I'm going to say a name or say something, and just let me know the first thing that comes to your mind. We're going to lead off with Dontrelle Willis.
D-Train Mania. Just the way he ignited baseball in South Florida and baseball.
Jack McKeon.
The most influential baseball person I've ever dealt with. He's had more to me. I would say he's like my baseball dad. I learned more just sitting next to him, and he influenced so much of how I see the game and approach how I even do my job.
Wow. What about Jose Fernandez?
Outside of sadness, just one of the most electrifying players that we've ever seen. And if there's one word, it's just personality, charisma. He was a complete package. He had the chance to be the face of this sport for a long time.
First thing you think of when I say Joe Robbie, pro player, Dolphins, Dolphin, Land Shark, Sun Life Stadium.
Rain delays.
That's the same thing I thought.
Delays.
That was my first thought.
And the
also.
funny thing is, Paul was, unfortunately for his well-being, I don't know how many years it took off my life, but rain delays. We didn't have a lot of rainouts, Paul.
Right, I know.
But we had a ton of rain delays because that field, and the amazing thing about that stadium is how quickly it drains. Remember, Geff? You could sit there and literally we'd be in the press dining, it'd be like 6:50, and there's like no rain in sight even, and they're ready 20 minutes before the first pitch, and next thing you know, you hear thunder, and the field's like 4 inches underwater. The grounds crew was easily the best in baseball. I love everyone. Oh, this is the best grounds crew in baseball. No, the Marlins grounds crew was easily the best because not only to deal with the rains that just came whenever, the winds that they had to do. The tarp was like throwing these guys, and they're like, getting that thing done. And then you'd sit out there and you'd see a lake out there, and we'd start at 8:00, and you'd think, oh, there's no one there who's going to play because you could basically fish out there. And then the field was bone dry. It was like unbelievable. The moment it even came close to stopping, that thing drained like crazy.
I got two more for you. What about Game 6 at Wrigley Field?
Oh, wow, Bartman. I tell you, personally, that game, after the Marlins won that game, because we know there was no press elevator to get down. You had to wiggle through 40,000 fans, and it's not easy to get to. Not a fan left. And I got down into the clubhouse. That 10-minute walk, I probably got down there in about 5, and I was basically sprinting. And no one left, and there was a lot of mumbling of words I can't say on the air right now. But it was complete shock.
Go for it. We're not regulated. Go for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, last one. We talk a lot about the future of sports in Miami these days. What about Tua Tagovailoa?
Oh, hold on. Let's see. Let me get ready.
There you go.
We'll go all in houndstooth.
He's got the houndstooth.
Yeah. For those who don't know Bear Bryant, the greatest American ever to be alive. But anyway.
Mayor of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Joe Frisaro.
Tua is going to electrify the market, and he is just, can't wait to see Tua play. He is going to be the face of football in South Florida.
So folks know you're very proud. If they don't know, they probably do. You're a very proud University of Alabama alumnus.
Let's see if we could get can we pick that up? What's on the wall?
What's that? Oh, Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
There we go. Okay.
Alabama.
Yeah, that's I'm your typical New Yorker who went to Alabama.
Exactly. So you and Mel Allen.
Yeah, me and Mel Allen. Yeah.
All right, Joe. This was great. It was good to visit with you. It's better to see you in the media room, but it's good to talk with you nonetheless. It's been fun, man.
Yeah, let's hope we're back sooner than later, guys. And you guys are doing a great job, and it's been a lot of fun. And we're fighting a good fight. And again, let's hope we're back and everybody's safe and well.
Yeah, we'll all keep churning out content. Some better than others, but content nonetheless.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Yeah, absolutely, Joe. Appreciate you. Thanks so much.
Yep. Okay.
Roll Tide.
Yeah, roll Tide. There's one more for the road. One more for the road. It's good to talk with Joe again. Such a tremendous perspective that he has had on this organization for years, really, and the ebbs, the flows, the ups, the downs, whatever it's been. Joe's been a part of it and covering it well.
You know, it's funny. I think about myself, having been here since 2008, and all the players and all the executives and the coaches and managers who have come and gone, how the media has turned over just since I got here in 2008. Joe's been here since 2002, even longer. So he really is the dean of the media covering this team on a regular basis. And you're not a Marlins fan. You're not really following the team the right way unless you're following Joe every day on MLB.com and through his Twitter feed. Nobody has his hand on the pulse of this franchise better than Joe does.
That's right. Joe and you guys talked about a memorable game at Wrigley Field. There was a memorable game at Wrigley Field last year where a Marlin hit his first major league home run. And, Geff, that might be a topic of conversation on our next show that is coming up on Tuesday.
He hit it off Cole Hamels, helped the Marlins come back and win a ball game at Wrigley last year. Tuesday, we're back at 4 o'clock, our next show with John Birdie, who made a nice first impression last year when, after a long time in the minor leagues, got a shot in the major leagues, really took advantage of his opportunity. And we'll take advantage of our opportunity to talk with him Tuesday at 4 on the next Sev Geff Live. That's right.
By now you probably know, but I'll say it anyway, all the different ways to follow the show, whether it be Twitter, Facebook, at Sev Geff Live for both of those things. And, of course, that's where our links go out from. So that was great. Good to talk with Joe. Good to get, again, some positive thoughts on this organization that, I'm sure that some people think that we have to say what we say when we're on the air. We don't. We choose to because I think we both truly believe that this organization is turned into the right direction, heading in that right direction, and as Joe said, staying that course as well.
Oh, Joe's been here a long time, like we said. Joe's there every day. Joe talks to everybody. He talks with scouts from other teams. He hears the scuttlebutt. He knows what's going on. So while as fans, everybody likes to have their own opinions and thoughts, this is somebody whose opinions and thoughts are highly educated. So it's always fun to listen to Joe.
Absolutely. Again, thanks to Joe Frisaro for joining us. John Birdie coming up Tuesday. Plenty of reminders along the way. But enjoy the weekend. Geff, it was good to see you, pal.
Great doing it again. We'll see you Tuesday.
All right, folks. Take care. See you.